Can a war film be so intense that it changes the way you watch every battle scene after it? Christopher Nolan did not build his war cinema from explosions alone. He studied pressure, silence, fear, and men breaking under impossible choices. These 12 films reveal the brutal DNA behind that style, from prisoner camps to collapsing empires and battlefield nightmares. But one film may explain Dunkirk better than anything Nolan ever said. Went the day well? 1942.
Funny, don't they? German names in an English churchyard.
This is not the polite village war film it first pretends to be. It is a nightmare wearing a British smile. Went the Day Well begins with quiet lanes, church bells, familiar faces, and the kind of rural calm that feels almost untouchable. Then invasion slips in through the front door. German soldiers arrive disguised as British troops, and suddenly every friendly handshake becomes suspicious. Every cup of tea feels dangerous, and every ordinary villager must decide how far they are willing to go to defend home. That is what makes this film so gripping for a Christopher Nolan fan. The tension does not come from giant battlefields, but from pressure closing in inch by inch. Made while the Second World War was still raging, it carries a strange urgency, almost like propaganda turned into a thriller. It's violent shocks because it breaks into kitchens, gardens, churches, and bedrooms. Britain is not shown as a fortress here, but as a target. And that is the punch. The film dares to ask whether ordinary people can become soldiers when history knocks at their door and fear stops being distant news, turning neighbors into defenders overnight. That makes its quiet terror unforgettable. The Cruel Sea, 1953. The Cruel Sea follows British sailors during the Battle of the Atlantic, but it refuses to turn war into easy heroism. These men are not swaggering action figures. They are exhausted professionals trapped between duty and moral damage. Every decision at sea carries a human cost. Rescue survivors or chase the submarine, save a few men or protect an entire convoy. That kind of impossible choice is exactly why this film feels close to the Christopher Nolan style of war storytelling. It understands that suspense is not only about survival, it is about what survival does to the soul. The film's power comes from restraint. Gray waters, cramped ship interiors, haunted faces, and a growing sense that the sea is swallowing everyone slowly. No explosion feels casual. No death feels decorative. By the end, victory does not feel clean or glamorous. It feels bruised, necessary, and painfully human, the kind of victory that leaves men alive, but never unchanged, still hearing the waves long after the battle ends, like guilt refusing to sink. It is courage measured in damage. That is its power. Ice Cold in Alex, 1958. Few war films make a simple glass of beer feel like the most important prize in the world. Ice Cold in Alex is built around a desert journey that slowly becomes a test of nerves, loyalty, exhaustion, and trust. A small group tries to cross North Africa in an ambulance during the Second World War, but the heat, the sand, and the suspicion between them become just as dangerous as the enemy. What makes the film unforgettable is how quietly it builds pressure. Nobody is charging into glory. Nobody is delivering grand speeches. These are tired people trying not to break before the desert breaks them first. For a Nolan fan, the appeal is obvious. Time, survival, physical endurance, and emotional tension are all working together like a ticking clock. The desert becomes a battlefield without needing constant gunfire. Every mile feels heavier than the last. Every delay feels dangerous. And when the famous final moment arrives, it lands because the film has made thirst, trust, and relief feel almost sacred. This is not just a journey film. It is suspense baked under the sun, with hope always one mirage away from vanishing. Every sip becomes a small victory earned. The Dam Busters, 1955. This is the rare war film where engineering feels as dramatic as combat. The Dam Busters turns a real wartime mission into a story of obsession, invention, risk, and impossible precision. Before the planes ever fly toward danger, the film makes you feel the pressure of solving a problem everyone thinks is nearly impossible. How to strike heavily defended dams with a weapon that must work at exactly the right speed, height, and angle. That is why it still feels gripping. The battle is not only in the sky, it is in the calculations, the experiments, the failures, and the nerves of the men asked to trust the idea with their lives. For viewers who admire Christopher Nolan's love of practical tension and mechanical detail, this film has a special charge. It makes procedure cinematic. It makes planning suspenseful. And when the mission finally begins, every movement feels terrifyingly fragile. This is not just a raid film. It is a countdown made of courage and mathematics. Battle of Britain, 1969. This is not just a film about planes in the sky. It is a film about a nation holding its breath. Battle of Britain captures one of the most defining moments of the Second World War, when Britain stood almost alone against the threat of invasion, and the Royal Air Force became the thin line between survival and collapse. What makes the film powerful is its scale, but also its patience. It does not rush into chaos. It shows command rooms, radar stations, exhausted pilots, tense civilians, and leaders trying to understand a battle that is moving faster than anyone can fully control. For a Christopher Nolan fan, this is essential viewing because you can feel the DNA that later echoes in Dunkirk. Time pressure, aerial terror, national anxiety, and ordinary men facing a historical moment too large to fully understand. The flying sequences still carry weight because they feel physical, dangerous, and grounded. There is no easy glamour here. The film understands that courage often looks like fatigue, confusion, and going back into the air when every instinct says stay down. It is a war film about endurance, not victory speeches, and that is why it still hits. The Man Who Would Be King, 1975. This is where adventure stops being fun and starts becoming a warning. The Man Who Would Be King may look like a grand imperial adventure at first, but underneath its sweeping landscapes and sharp dialogue is a story about arrogance, myth-making, greed, and men who start believing their own legend. Sean Connery and Michael Caine play two former British soldiers who travel into remote Afghanistan with a wild dream to rule as kings. At first, the film has the energy of an old-fashioned adventure tale, full of charm, danger, and confidence. But slowly, that confidence turns rotten. The deeper they go, the more the story becomes a psychological trap. That is why it belongs on a Nolan fan list. Nolan's best films often study men consumed by obsession, men who build systems, lies, identities, or missions so powerful they eventually destroy them. This film does exactly that, but with the dust and danger of empire around it. It is not a conventional battlefield movie, yet it is absolutely about power, violence, and the cost of believing you are untouchable. By the end, the adventure has become a funeral for ego. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983. Some war films scream, this one quietly stares at you until you feel trapped. Merry Christmas. Mr. Lawrence takes place inside a Japanese prisoner of war camp during the Second World War, but its real battlefield is psychological. The conflict is not built only from weapons or escape plans. It comes from pride, discipline, shame, desire, cultural misunderstanding, and the dangerous need to dominate another human being. David Bowie gives one of his most haunting performances as Major Jack Selliers, a prisoner whose strange calm becomes a threat to the camp's emotional order. Tom Conti brings intelligence and restraint as Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence, a man trying to understand both sides while standing inside a system designed to crush understanding. For a Nolan fan, this film matters because it treats war as moral pressure, not spectacle. Every silence feels loaded, every glance feels political, every act of kindness or cruelty becomes a test of identity. Nagisa Oshima directs it with a hypnotic tension that never needs to explode loudly to feel dangerous. This is a film about captivity, but also about the prisons people build inside themselves. And that makes it unforgettable. The Thin Red Line, 1998.
She just shook her head.
This is the war film that looks at combat and asks a question most battle movies avoid: what is war doing to the soul? The Thin Red Line follows American soldiers during the Guadalcanal campaign, but Terrence Malick is not interested in a simple march from mission to victory. He turns war into a spiritual crisis. The jungle is beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The soldiers whisper thoughts like prayers. Fear, memory, love, nature, violence, and death all seem to exist in the same breath. That makes the film deeply different from traditional war cinema, and also deeply useful for understanding why Nolan admires films that push beyond normal battlefield storytelling. There are moments of combat here, but the real tension comes from the contrast between human brutality and the calm indifference of the natural world. The cast is enormous, yet the film often feels intimate, almost like we are hearing private thoughts from men who may not survive the next hill. It is slow, poetic, and emotionally heavy, but never empty. Some viewers expect action and get meditation. Others realize that is exactly the point. This is war stripped of glory and turned into a terrifying question mark. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. This is not just one of the greatest war films ever made. It is one of cinema's sharpest warnings about duty turning into madness. The Bridge on the River Kwai begins inside a Japanese prisoner of war camp, where British prisoners are forced to build a railway bridge. But David Lean does something far more disturbing than a simple survival story. He turns the bridge into a psychological battlefield. Colonel Nicholson, played with unforgettable authority by Alec Guinness, believes discipline and British pride can preserve his men's dignity. At first, that sounds noble. Then it becomes obsession. The very thing meant to prove moral strength begins to serve the enemy's war machine. That is the genius of the film. It makes duty look heroic, then slowly reveals how dangerous blind principle can become. For a Christopher Nolan fan, the appeal is obvious. This is a story about time, construction, pressure, identity, and men trapped inside systems they helped create. The suspense builds, not through constant action, but through moral confusion. Who is right? Who is lost? Who has mistaken pride for honor? By the end, the explosion is not only physical, it is psychological, and that final realization still feels devastating. All Quiet on the Western Front, 1930.
This is what we must do. Strike with all our power.
This is the war film that tears the metal off the uniform and shows the wound underneath. All Quiet on the Western Front is one of the earliest and most devastating anti-war films ever made, and what makes it still powerful is how brutally it destroys the fantasy of glory. The story follows young German students who are inspired by patriotic speeches and pushed toward the battlefield as if war is a noble adventure. But the front line does not care about slogans. It gives them mud, fear, hunger, explosions, and the slow death of innocence. For a Christopher Nolan fan, this film matters because it understands something Nolan often returns to. War is not only action, it is time collapsing around people who are too young to understand the machine they have entered. The film's battlefield sequences feel chaotic, but its emotional damage is even more frightening. You watch boys become soldiers, then watch soldiers become ghosts before they are even dead. The film does not need modern effects to hurt. Its power comes from faces, silence, panic, and the terrible realization that an entire generation is being fed into history. By the final moments, the title feels bitterly ironic. Nothing is quiet, nothing is peaceful, and nothing about war feels heroic anymore. The Battle of Algiers, 1966. This film does not feel like history being recreated. It feels like history breaking into the room. The Battle of Algiers is not a British war film, but it belongs near the top of this Nolan-inspired list because its influence on tension, realism, and urban conflict is impossible to ignore. Shot with a documentary-like style, the film drops viewers into the Algerian struggle against French colonial rule and refuses to make the experience comfortable. Streets become traps, crowds become weapons, silence becomes suspense. Every checkpoint, doorway, rooftop, and narrow alley feels loaded with danger. What makes it so gripping is that it does not rely on traditional heroes or simple villains. It studies systems, resistance, fear, violence, and the brutal logic of occupation. For a Nolan fan, this is essential because it shows how suspense can be built without long explanations or emotional hand-holding. The camera makes you feel trapped inside events as they unfold, almost in real time. That pressure cooker feeling is exactly why viewers connect it to Dunkirk. Both films understand that survival becomes more intense when the audience is denied escape. This is not entertainment in the easy sense. It is cinema as a controlled panic attack, political, urgent, and still dangerously alive. Dunkirk, 2017. This is the film where Christopher Nolan turned war into a ticking clock, a drowning breath, and a prayer for rescue. Dunkirk does not behave like a normal war movie. There are no long speeches, no traditional hero arc, and almost no backstory. Instead, Nolan throws us into land, sea, and air, then lets time itself become the enemy. Soldiers wait on a beach with nowhere to hide. Civilian boats move toward danger instead of away from it. Pilots fight in the sky while fuel runs out second by second. That structure is what makes the film unforgettable. It is not asking us to understand war through politics or strategy. It is asking us to feel the physical terror of being trapped. Every sound matters. Every wave feels threatening. Every aircraft engine becomes a warning. Nolan's genius here is restraint. He strips away the usual war movie language and leaves only pressure, movement, fear, and survival. The result is a film that feels massive and intimate at the same time. You are watching history, but you are also watching individual bodies trying to stay alive for one more minute. That is why Dunkirk deserves the #1 spot. It is not just influenced by great war cinema, it feels like Nolan's answer to all of it. War films are not powerful because they show who won. They are powerful because they reveal what fear, duty, pride, and survival do to human beings. These 12 films prove why Nolan's war cinema feels so intense. The real battle is never just outside. It is inside the mind. Which one would you place at #1?